This is going to be good. Please give a warm welcome to Natasha.
Thanks. Thank you very much for that welcome. And thank you for having me on stage. As Nick already revealed, my name is Natasha. I'm the head of technology at Maersk Growth. So I'm here to share and hopefully inspire on how we can collaborate. Whether you're an investor who wants to co-invest within our industry, or you're a startup who needs us as a scale engine for your journey, or funding for that matter's sake. I'm going to touch 3 areas. So the first area will be what Maersk Growth is and why we're here. The next will be what we invest in. And finally, how we can unleash the rocket fuel as a corporation towards your startup. If you have questions, I'm not sure Nick said that, but they're using Slido as you saw before, so you can hit the questions there. And we'll take a few minutes in the end. Here we go. So behind Maersk Growth. So we were founded in the beginning of 2017 with the purpose of creating growth in adjacent markets for Maersk. And we had a long history of innovation and growth. Even though many of you might not bridge innovation with a company like Maersk, it's actually been a huge part of our DNA since we were founded in 1904. This is just a snapshot of some of the companies that we founded, we grew, and we closed down again since we were founded over 100 years ago. It's everything from whaling to sugar planting to even medical services. So we had a long journey, and that's the journey we're continuing in Maersk Growth, igniting that entrepreneurial nexus and DNA in our company to create future growth for Maersk. So why invest in the future? If we look at how companies and how industries has been disrupted for the past many decades, it's actually rarely the incumbents that hits the next wave of innovation because we focus too much on the product or what we were doing yesterday or our assets. So we're trying to maintain status quo. So in order to look at the future, you need another lens. You need to look long term, and you need to look at science for innovation, science for disruptions, and those science typically comes from startups. So startups around the world experimenting with new technologies, coming in from the outside and looking at the industry with fresh eyes and new solutions. But with that thing in common, that we're still solving the customer pain. So at Maersk Growth, we're looking at the next wave of our industry. So which technologies will we live off in 5 or 10 years? Which companies will support the value chain we deliver today? And where are the future profit pools for Maersk? So Maersk Growth is a CVC, so a corporate venture capital department. So we have a fund where we invest in early stage and Series A startups. We look for startups who has some growth, some revenue, and a team as well, so everything in place. So it's not very early stage. There is a product market fit typically. And what is very important for us, which is also the headline of my topic today, that's how we can act as a partner, how we can come with our rocket fuel and help startups scale. So a little bit on what we invest in. The first domain we look at is enable trade. So there is a trend that SMEs are growing throughout the globe. So we see an explosion, and will see an explosion in global trade, driven by small and medium enterprises. And in order to support that growth and that trend, we must make trade much easier. We want to make, that's our ambition, to make trade as easy as pressing a button. And it's definitely not easy today to ship your goods from Thailand to New York or wherever you are in the world. So we're looking at solutions that can help you finance your products, that helps enable trust between buyer and seller, so you know when you actually ship something, you'll get the money, and when you pay, that you'll actually get your goods. And finally, also access to information and handling of information. So for every seed we put into the ocean, we also put an airplane in the sky with all the documentation. So there's huge potential in our industry to make that much easier. The other area, a domain, is fight food waste. And as many of you already know, 30% of all food is wasted. And 80% of that actually happens in our supply chain. So even though you're good citizens at home and sorting your garbage, the true impact is actually in the supply chain. So it's not only a huge growth potential for Maersk, it's also a huge sustainability agenda. We can create a lot of impact globally if we can fix some of the problems in that value chain. The last area is next-gen logistics. So next-generation logistics is mostly about emerging technologies. So with additive manufacturing, what's going to happen to the production worker in Bangladesh? Or what's going to happen to what we ship? It can also be what will happen to trust and with blockchain, or what we see with AI and robotics, how we can automate warehouses and many of the other areas within our supply chain. So this is the criteria for what we look for when we invest in startups. But that's not enough. You might have a great product within our industry, but we're still looking at some few other things. So we invest in stars. It's really important for us that when we see a product that it has a potential of scale, that it's not only solving a tiny problem in a small place, but it's actually something that will solve bigger elements either globally or across the value chain. The other area is technology. So the technology you as a startup are developing, is that something that's going to change or disrupt or in any way affect our industry significantly? And as you know, I don't know how many of you are startups in the room. I have quite a few. Ambition is quite important. And even though we live in Denmark and we have a pretty good security net, having that ambition of entering and conquering the globe is very important, because many of the issues we see is not a local problem, it's a global problem. So we're looking for solutions that, and also startups who has the ambition to conquer the world. Revenue is another area that is important, that you actually had that product market fit, that you went to customers and they were willing to pay for it. So you found your product, but it's also solving a pain that's huge enough for customers, so they're willing to pay. So having traction, showing that your business model works, that you're solving something significantly. And finally, skills, and that's the most important area. That's the team. So for you startups, you also know when you found your startup, it's rarely the initial idea you start with that's going to be the end idea. So we're looking for teams who are brilliant at pivoting, learning, and launching all the time, because once you get your product to the customers, things are more likely to change. So having a team that can embrace all that learning and pivot their product into what the market wants, that is key for what we invest in. So in this digital era, we've seen a few decades where software has been eating the world, but now we also see that there's a need for digitizing hardware. So all the physical assets of our world is being digitized in our digital era. And that's where companies like Maersk and other corporate venture departments, they have a new role to play. Because it's not easy if you don't have those assets in our age to build new growth. So that's the network and that's the collaboration that we want to nurture with the startups we invest in. So the third area I'm going to talk to you about is how we can add value as a scale engine when we invest in startups. So first, when you have a startup that no one has heard about, it can be pretty easy to go out and sell it out there. So having someone like Maersk or another big brand behind you, building that trust, but also showing that we trust in this startup, we invest in it, can actually open quite some doors. The other area is customers, so access to customer insights. So some of the startups we work with, we make sure that they get access to customers where they can test their assumption on the market, or understand whether there's a market need that they haven't solved with their product. So getting that direct access to new customers is crucial for many startups. And also building a case. So if they can say they sold the product to a customer and use that for the upcoming sell, that has value as well. With all the assets we have, we can also deliver pilots for startups. So we can help them test whether a product works or not. And we've done that quite a few times as well, because when you sit and design stuff, it's not the same as being on sea and all these other real-time situations that you're designing for. So giving access to our core, who's actually having these problems and having these assets, is what we do with Rocket Fuel as well. Now, data is gold, as we know, and we have a lot of data. And giving access to that can provide valuable knowledge for startups. So it's a regional information you need when you go into the market. It can be information from Latin America that you don't have access to, or the energy consumption on ships or other areas. So access to data is another area that we want to put into the startups we invest in. And finally, we have 90,000 good colleagues out there, and they have a lot of expertise within our industry. So getting some of the design mechanisms, some of the other areas within your business tested with someone who's actually worked within the space for a lot of years is crucial for many startups. So these are some of the areas that we work with, and we also do partnerships. So one thing that's different from a CVC like ours, if you compare it to a typical venture capital fund, is that we're in it for long-term growth. So we're not in it for a flip or an exit on a short-term basis. We're in it to find future growth for Maersk, and therefore we're a long-term growth partner for your startup as well. These are some of the startups we invested in to give you a little taste. So Center Transport is an app that's tracking and improving food loss in the supply chain. So it's giving access to truckers, or giving truckers access to the information they need about the goods in their trucks. We have a telesense, which is a little tennis ball size sensor that you put into commodity goods. For example, grains. So in the good old days and many places in the world right now, you put your hand into the grain and measure, is it ready to sell, or should we skip it, is it gone bad? But with these sensors, you can actually constantly monitor, okay, this area of the warehouse or this commodity trade over here is actually the pieces we should sell to our audience right now, or to our customers right now. So that's one way of preventing food loss, is on that level. The third startup we invested in is called Ripe. So that's the blockchain for food, and that encounters visibility, but also authenticity. So when you buy an avocado, that you actually know it's organic or comes from the farmer you were promised. And then we have TradeLens. That's also formerly known as Global Trade Digitization. That's a platform that was incubated in Maersk Growth and now is driven by our core departments. So this was a little flavor of what we actually invest in. I mentioned we had the domain called Fight Food Waste, and the way we've worked with startups in that is that we screen all over the world for startups who's actually solving the problem. And we're running 3 programs. One of them was in the spring. We're running one right now, and one after New Year's as well. And what we do is we invite startups all over the world to participate. And out of almost 200 applicants on the first one we ran, we chose 10. And those 10 startups came from 10 different countries around the world. And they joined us for a month where we were testing how the rocket fuel I just talked about, whether there was a match. So if we don't see that value add, where we can go in as a scale engine, we won't invest. So it has to have some kind of relevance to our strategy. It has to have some kind of relevance for the startup where we can actually bring some assets and help them in their journey. But I'll show you a short video because that says more than 1,000 words on how the startups were actually engaging in our program. I'm looking at Simon. He's putting up the volume. Great. Thanks.
So the program is a 4.5-week program that ends with what we call a demo day. And a demo day is where the 10 startups essentially pitches not only the solution they have, but also some of the learnings they've done over the last 4.5 weeks. And this is their opportunity to see whether they can actually get an investment from Maersk Growth in their startups.
We have invited 20 experts from all different parts of Maersk. The 10 food truck startups are having 30-minute speed meetings with them and asking all of these questions to validate their problem, their solution, and getting industry insights.
We deep dive into concepts such as market needs, value proposition, and we then build upon those with other elements such as go-to-market strategy, business model, capital allocation, and by the end to try to articulate all those elements into an investor-friendly message.
I think it's a wise approach. They don't go looking at hundreds of startups, but they say before we do something with them, let's have them here for a month and get to know them better. But hey, it's a business and I think they are doing a good job.
Partnership with Maersk seemed like quite an opportunity for us, as Maersk is a respectful company that has distinguished goals in sustainable development.
Programs like these create an environment for us to add into ourselves what we lack.
Personally, I like the kind of people who are attending. They are super talented. They have their own unique problems and the solutions they're building.
There are some very interesting startups, 3 of the startups which we would like to make a collaboration further. Talks are going on, so let's see what happens in the future.
So these 10 startups, they engaged over a month with our experts in the core, where they were testing for every week. So every Friday, they were pitching again, and we could see huge improvements week by week. They also got access to the customers, as I spoke, data insights and other things. So by the end of that month, even though we didn't invest in many of these companies, they went out of this journey much wiser. So as I mentioned, we are having one more program, the second last in the food track Maersk Venture program. And there is a deadline by the 30th of September. So if you are a food startup or you know someone, please spread the word. You can see the address up here, maerskventureprogram.io, and feel free to join us there. Oops, sorry. So that was a bit about Maersk Growth and how we can add value as a scale engine. So we're looking for future profit pools and we're looking for future growth, but we can't do it without you guys. So we're all around the world right now looking for startups that are matching our domains. And if you have any startup or technologies or any knowledge about anyone that could be relevant, please send me an email and I would love to look at it. So thank you so much for having me. And we are having a Slido session here so you can ask some questions. They promised me, at least, so feel free to shoot. Technologies should come there. So what factors are key in facilitating collaboration? So if I understand your question right, the first factor is whether there's a match in our domain. So is it under our food waste domain or enabled trade or next generation logistics? So after that, we look at, does it play a role for Maersk in our strategic journey? So being the global integrator of transport and logistics, can your startup actually play a role in fulfilling that future growth or areas in that value chain where we're not strong today? And finally, as I mentioned, the rocket fuel. Can we deliver value in that collaboration? If we can't, then you should go with the regular VC. So that's very crucial for us, that there is a value add with us as a partner. In what program an AM startup fit? American or what? AM, can you, what does that stand for? Early bird startup? No? Additive manufacturing, okay. So that's definitely next generation logistics. So we had a geek here saying AM instead of 3D printing or additive manufacturing, just so you know. So that would be under next generation logistics, and that is super interesting because on the short term, of course, we see a lot of additive manufacturing and production, but in the end, or in 5 or 10 years, we might even see how it changes the last mile if you start producing while you actually deliver. So there's huge potential for that, but it is under our next generation logistics domain. Any other questions? You can also shout them if you don't have your Slido installed. There's a mic somewhere. No? Anyone? The champagne pop there. Okay, do you invest on terms similar to normal VCs? Yes, we do, and we are very term friendly. So one thing that is very important for us is that we are fast. So collaborating with us will be the same as collaborating with the VC. We look at the startups and the potential very quickly. So agility and speed is in the way we have structured our corporate venture. And the terms, they're similar, and as I said, they're startup friendly. So we're going to be fair and square. So what happens after the investments? So that depends on the startup that we invest in. So what we do with the portfolio we have today is we typically have a board seat. And what we use that board seat for is understanding how we can contribute as a company. So out of our 90,000 employees, are there anyone in our business that is crucial to your scale journey? So do you need someone from Latin America or China? Do you need someone who has experience on shipping or sales or whatever your area might be? So we're validating, as I mentioned, the rocket fuel. So before we invest, we screen the rocket fuel potential. But after the investment, that's where the rocket fuel work actually starts. So where we'll start to collaborate and figure out how we can deliver that value that we've promised. Do you match outside companies with your startups to utilize their service? Ooh, it's fast here. There it is. Yes, so what we do is, of course, we look at the competitors in the market. So when we invest in an area, we probably screened a lot of startups who's doing similar things. So if there is a company, and there mostly is nowadays, it's rare you see radical, lonely innovation, and if no one else has done it, it might not be a really good idea after all, or you might be too early. But we're definitely looking on other companies in that field. I'm not sure if you're asking another question, but that's my best answer. Otherwise, come back. Okay, what does the future of Maersk Growth look like in 24 months? Well, that's a nice short time frame. I would say within the next 24 months, I really hope we have a nice portfolio of companies. We already started on building it, so we'll continue to build this portfolio within our 3 domains. The dream for us is also to have a strong collaboration with our core, so making sure that all the entrepreneurial node we have inside our business, that we get that out to the startups we work with, and also help inspire from the inside and the outside. So startups can learn from us, and we can definitely learn a lot from the startups as well. And also we want to be the home for ideas. So if anyone has an idea that can affect our industry, we want to host that and we want to facilitate that. So that's not only for our core colleagues, but also for people outside. So having a solution to a challenge or seeing a business opportunity, we want to make that a home for anyone entrepreneurial. Whether it requires to relocate in order to be a part of our program, yes, it does, for a month. And the reason you have to be there is because so much happens and you're working really intensely. You're also learning from the other startups. So much of the value, of course, comes from the collaboration with Maersk, but it definitely also comes from all the other startups who are participating, where you can see they're progressing, or they might be specialists in a technology that you want access to, or other things. So lots of the value actually comes from being there. It also shows us that you're serious about collaborating with us, because if you want to take the time out, then you mean business. We also know that most startups have a business they have to run, so what we typically see is that 1 or 2 co-workers join the program while the rest are running the business on their primary location. This is good questions. Thank you. Keep them coming. Okay, how do you see the transport logistics startup ecosystem evolve in Denmark, and who will be the key players? So we have a lot of ecosystems in Denmark already, and I think with the tradition we have within logistics and transportation, there's definitely potential to make a log-tech hub in Copenhagen as well. But as you also know, to make an ecosystem, you need mass, so you need people who are inventing in that space, you need investors, you need angels, and you need universities. So what we're of course doing is also talking to anyone within our area and seeing if there's actually an ecosystem that can be sprouted out of Denmark already. So I think with the funds we have and the energy we put into it, I hope we can play a role in that as well. The main gains from Maersk from collaborating with startups, I think for any big company, if you're talking to customers or anyone on the outside, getting that outside-in view on your business is priceless, because you're seeing things, you're talking to people that employees in a company might not talk to, because they're solving a day-to-day problem. So I think it's a huge value for our business to hear the stories of the startups. And I know the mentors we had on our food track program, they were as inspired as the startups are. So that's the beauty of collaborating, is that value is offered in 2 ways. Okay, what size of ownership we generally seek? Good question as well. So we are typically going after 10 to 20%, and we would like a board seat. Our range is between $500,000 up to $5 million, and our sweet spot is $1 to $2 million. So depending on the technology, that's what we're looking for. And whether we are hiring, well, we are always hiring. So you can come talk to me about that after if you want to. So how to bridge startup and corporate culture. Let's see how much time I have. I can talk a long time about that one. So I think I've been in startups in almost 10 years, and the beauty of startups is that we're fast, we're creative, we're agile, we're constantly in the market, but we're also always out of funds and also out of customers mostly. So I think for startups, it has a huge value to actually see corporations as someone you can collaborate with, instead of someone who's too distant from what you're solving. So exchanging knowledge and also getting some of the realism into your company as a startup is very important. And what we also see in startups is that they typically address a minor problem in a big value chain. And if you want to solve something like food waste, it's not enough to solve one element. You have to solve across the value chain. So as a big corporate who's actually owning the assets and having that end-to-end value chain in their control, you can affect much more as a startup because you can get access and understand what's going on at the the other verticals that you're also trying to address. So I think getting that more holistic and more broader impact into your startup can create great value. And I didn't answer the corporate culture because I got interrupted, but...
Yeah, exactly. And you didn't, because I interrupted you, but I was going to say specific. So we worked together a bunch. You said something that triggered my mind, which is startups are always running out of money.
Mostly.
And Camilla mentioned that in the last one, and I'm like, I had to start, they're running out of money, but yes, the telephone call from your bank, when you see the number and you're like, fuck, no. I was thinking like...
I still have that problem.
Yeah. All right, that makes two of us. But anyway,
we'll talk about that later.
All right, so ways that you guys can help. Like I was wondering, like one of the questions I asked you guys earlier was your payment terms. 60 days, 90 days, 100 days. Are you working with that at all? Like how you pay the invoices. One of the big problems of working with corporates is that you have to be approved as a vendor to send them an invoice. Then you have to learn how to send the invoice correctly and then get paid.
So you're asking a vendor question or how we're unleashing the funds, or?
Well, yeah, just like if we work with you on a practical level, like how quick do we actually see the money, or is that like something you're still working on? Because I say this because in your defense, this is a new program.
Well, I would say no. So the startups we invest in, we release the funds.
Yeah,
it depends on the terms. Sometimes you have tranches where you have to deliver on the milestones. But as I mentioned, it's very crucial for us to be fast and be as competitive to other VCs. So speed is in our process. So that's not an issue.
So on the vendor strictly side, investing on working with startups. Like, I mean, do you also just like buy stuff from startups?
Oh yeah, we have a huge corporation, and sometimes the startups we see, we also direct them to the core. So we might not want to invest, but we see that they can actually solve a problem for our colleagues. So we pass them on.
Because you're doing a lot of stuff in different
bits. I'm not an expert in invoice
bits.
processes.
No,
I'm sorry, Nick, but
it's just you end up being an expert when you're the guys receiving the money. All right, because I mean, so you got other pieces of the Maersk. Because I also loads of people. I'm like, no, that's not something Maersk Growth works with. But should they talk to you?
Well, if you see a fit within our industry and you're a startup, we're always open to hear your story and how you're solving the problem. And as I mentioned just now, if you're not fit within our investment domains, we also forward it to our colleagues where we can actually see you're solving a problem, or we can help in other ways. So sometimes we're just the hub for your next step, and we're fine with that. So invoicing, we have another department taking care of that. So, but on the funds and the investments, we're definitely as compatible as any VC. And on the corporate culture, I just want to answer on that. I think all the energy you get in a startup and the agility and creativity, most organizations also want that. And I think in order to thrive and in order to create growth in our age, you need to ignite that DNA and that culture into corporations as well. Not only because employees expect that they can be creative and they can live out their entrepreneurial thoughts. I think that's just the workforce of the future. But also because if we can't be as slow and as we've been for many decades. We have to be fast because the changes in technology, the changes in markets are just happening so fast, so we need to move at that pace. And that's what a corporate venture department also can do, a corporate innovation department, however you're set up, is that you can have someone who has the ability and the luxury to actually look beyond a short-term focus, but look into the future and also what are people working on right now that might affect you in 2, 5, or 10 years? So many employees don't have that luxury. But we want to, as I mentioned, we want to reignite that entrepreneurial spirit in Maersk. We've had it since we were founded, and I think for any company to survive, you need that in your DNA as well. When, how, and where to apply for your program. So the Maersk Venture Program, I think it was taken off now, but Maersk Venture Program with an E in the end.io, you can apply there. And also we have a website, it is also on my last slide, so probably didn't get on, but it's growth.maersk.com. You can also see anything we're doing in there. And my email was there as well, so I think the next one, I'll just go to that. Nope, that was just Q&A. Whoops, here we go. So you were touching as well, sorry. So yeah, maerskventureprogram.io, you can apply for a food track there, and we're gonna have one in the new year as well. And if you have any other questions, my email is there, or my Twitter handle if you want to connect. And Nick is tripping over here, so I probably have to get off stage. Thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful tech barbecue.